Here you go. What's going on?
Pardon?
How are you?
Okay. Hi, Annie.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Good evening. We are on Vav Amid Aleph.
Yep.
The definition of a cotton is he can't sit on his father's shoulders when he's taking him to Shalim. Maski Flarav Zera. Adhecha man asya. Well, I don't get it. Who brought him to Yerushalayim? Somebody took him to Yerushalayim. If he was old enough for that, he's old enough to go to Harabayas. The mother, she's mechayiv in la'alis l'regel and to be mesamech with the husband. Rashi says dalash simcha nistavu noshim tichsiv v'samachta ta uveisecha. Veisecha always refers to your wife. So she took the child. Now, remember, Harabayas was high up. If he could go and hold on to the hand of the father up to Harabayas, Chayim, Ilo Potter. Heshiv Rebbe Tachas Beis Hillel. Rebbe responded to the sheet of Beis Hillel. The Divrei Beis Shammai. According to Beis Shammai, the following pasuk relating to Chana is going to be problematic. Because it says, V'chana lo alsa. Chana did not go up aliyah l'regel. Ki amra li yishad yigam el anar vav yosef. I have to wait until the child gets finished nursing, which Rashi says is 24 months. Now, in the initial Mishnah, we said, as long as the child can sit on the shoulders of the father, go up to Yerushalayim, Darabayas. Now, from Shiloh to the Mishkan, which was present at the time of Chana, is certainly easier than that. Right? Why didn't Shmuel get taken by his father? Even before 24 months, he was probably big enough to ride on the shoulders of the father. So that's clear proof that the criteria is be able to walk with your feet a certain distance and not necessarily be carried by your father. So Rebbe's father said, Ulutameh, you're bringing a proof from Chana, Tikshalacha, Chana Guva Milocha, Machayv Mesimcha. Well, I understand. Chana was Machayev and Simcha, we just determined. Because it says, V'samach l'tavisecha, how could Chana not go up? You have to say, Chazi baby Shmuel. Chana saw that the child was very weak, and she was concerned that the weakness of Shmuel would damage him, and she wouldn't be able to bring him. And therefore, she couldn't go until he was bigger. There's no raya from there. Boy Rav Shimon, cotton shechiger, liter de Beis Shammai. A lame cotton, according to Beis Shammai, if he can ride on his father's back, it's fine, even if he can't walk himself. Or a child who's blind, tinik suma. Cotton cotton Beis Shammai v'suma de Beis Shneim. Who can? I mean, a blind suma can hold his father's hand too. What's the din? Echidami. Ilema. We're talking about somebody who's lame, who's never going to be healed, or a suma, a kid that's blind that can't be healed. Well, I don't get it. Hashta gadol potter cotton the boy. Even as an adult chiger, an adult blind person is going to be potter from aliyah regel. So there's no shaila that a cotton like that is going to be potter. Well, tzricha the chiddush is bechiger sheyachol ispashev, v'tumah sheyachol ispatech. Somebody who's lame or blind who can heal. What's the din? If he's going to grow up to be a gadol, who is going to be chai midaraisa, then of course there's a mitzvah of chinuch midrabanan. However, kolecha the gadol potter midaraisa, but a suma, if he grows up and he does not get healed, he would be potter. Midrabanan not be potter. So since if he remains the way he is now as a gadol, he'd be potter. So he would be potter by the way he is now as well. Beis Shammai oimrim hari'iyah shtei kesef. An oila is worth double what a chagigah is. And Beis Hillel learns us the opposite. Torah Beis Shammai hari'iyah shtei kesef. A chagigah rak mo'achas kesef. A re'iyah is 2 ma'ah, and a chagiga is 1 ma'ah. Why? Shari'iyah oila kula legavoya. The korban oila is more chashuv. Nobody eats from it. It's completely burned to Hashem. Mashekin b'chagiga. Korban shlamim is eaten. And another reason to give superiority to the ola as opposed to a shlamim. Shavuos, there are more oilas. You bring par shnei elim b'shiva kvasim la'ola, and then you have shnei kvasim l'shlamim. So we see that an ola is preferred. Beis Hillel ariyah mo kesef chagiga shtei kesef. That the oilas riyah is half the price of a chagiga. That a chagiga is preferred. Because number one, shechagiga yesh lefnei adibur. Koydem matan Torah, he krivu shlamim b'sinai, says Rashi. Dichsiv vayishlachas narei b'nei Yisrael. Vaval gav the high krok siv b've'ela mishpatim la'achar aseret adibros. Koydem aseret adibros hava ve'ein mokdim b'mocha b'Torah. V'achi time masech l'Shabbos perk Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Yossi Omer b'sheni olav v'yoran. Moshe Rabbeinu went up and down on the second. B'shlishi olav v'yoran. B'revi yorav v'shuv lo Allah. On the 5th he brought a korban. B'shishi nit the Torah. Ve'ena tamoid seben nesins the Torah binyan mizbech ela ba'oiso shnemar vayishlachas narei b'nei Yisrael. And right now the Gemara assumes that korban was a shlamim. So l'chora korban chagiga was offered even before Matan Torah. Masha ein came b'riyah oilis riyah only became a chiyuv after Matan Torah. The Nasi b'Chanukah Samad Bayich Krivu Shlamim Yoiser Ma'oilas T'chsiv Kol HaBoker LaOila U'Chopakar Zevach HaShlamim. So again, there were more Shlamim than Oilas. Beis Hillel my time in Amrika Beis Shammai. Why didn't Beis Hillel hold like Beis Shammai? How do they push aside the proofs of Beis Shammai regarding that an ola is kula legavoa and by Shavuos? Why? Because you want to say the oila is more important to oila kula legavoa, and one of the criteria is what? That the oila is l'shamayim adarabba. Chagiga difa the is b'shtei achilos. It's more choshev that there are 2 people that are allowed to eat There's achila gavoya and achila hedyoid. Some of it is burnt to Hashem, some of it the bali meat. Udika amrit nelif matzeres. You want to learn from Shavuos where they brought more oilos? However, done in korban yochid, mi korban yochid. You have to do apples and apples. An oila re'iyah is a personal korban. And I would rather learn from the Sim who brought their korbanos, which were also korban yochid. So done in korban yochid, mi korban yochid. Vein done in korban yochid, mi korban sibur. The korbanos brought on Shavuos was a korban sibur. So it's preferable to learn yochid to yochid. Okay, so that's how Beis Hillel deflect Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, my time lo amrika Beis Hillel. Why did Beis Shammai learn like Beis Hillel that you preference shlomim over an oila? Because what were Beis Hillel's reasoning to call Amr Chagigah DAf, the Yeshon Lefnei Dibur? You brought a raya that Korban Chagigah was brought on the 5th day of Sivan before Matan Torah. Re'iyah nami Yeshon Lefnei Dibur was also brought there by Vayishlach Bnei Yisrael. They built a mizbech. They also brought oilos. Udika Amrit. Another proof you Beis Hillel said is Neilif Min. Learn it from the Korban Nesim. Done in Davar Noeg L'Doros. Mi Davar Noeg L'Doros. Oilus free is done year after year after year. So we'd rather learn it from Korban Atzeres, which is also korbanos that were brought every year on Shavuos. The Ein Done in Davar Noeg L'Doros. Mi Davar Shein Noeg L'Doros. The Korban Nesim was a one-off. It was only one time done. So we're not going to learn Dinei Korbanos from something that was only done once. So where did Beis Hillel learn that there was such a thing as Korban Chagigah even before Matan Torah? On the 5th day of Sivan, they brought these shlamim. They brought both. That's not an oilus yachid, a donative ola that's brought by an individual. It was the korban atamid that was brought by the tzibur at that time, which is a korban tzibur. And therefore, it was not an oilus yachid in the midbar. Therefore, you can't learn it, the oilus re'iyah, which is an oilus yachid. Now, this statement is going to bring up a lot of discussion in the Gemara. So Beis Hillel holds that ola that they offered on the 5th day of Sivan was an oila satami to korban sibur. Beis Shammai savi oila shikari sabim but oila sriyavi. It was an oila re'iyah like because it says vayechazu es ha'elokim. It was right before Shavuos. It was like the oila sriiyah for that year's Shavuos. Okay. Omer Abaye, Beis Shammai, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yishmael, Kulus Virlu, Oilish, Ikris, Rabbi Midbar, Oilish Riyavi. That korban that was brought the day before Matan Torah was an Oilish Riyah. Beis Hillel, Rabbi Kiv, Rabbi Yosef Lili, Kulus Virlu, Oilish, Ikris, Rabbi Midbar, Oilish Tamid Avi. It was a korban Tamid. Beis Shammai is Hadamaram. We just said. Beis Shammai Savri, Oilish, Ikris, Rabbi Midbar, Oilish Riyavi. Rabbi Shmuel. Where do we see Rabbi Shmuel holds the same thing? The Tanya.
Ernie, surely we would have a Messiah on this between an oilus Ariya and oilus Tamid. You would have a Messiah. Everybody brought it in the midbar. You know everything that went on in the midbar. How come you don't have a Messiah on this? There's a machlokes.
This is a machlokes Tanoim as to the oil. They all agree that an oiler was brought because it says Vayalu Olot.
Yeah, but
there's a debate among the Tanoim whether that oiler was an oiler satamid or whether there's an oiler. We have machlokes Tanoim in virtually everything. What was the reality? What was the historical fact? We have many arguments regarding what was the historical fact.
But you usually, when it happened in the midbar, you have alocha leMoshe Misira. You know what it was.
Okay. Here we have a major machlokas regarding what the korban was.
What's the nafkamina between a tamid and a riyah?
So the very big, because
I said that the Tamid is brought twice a day. I mean,
No,
it's
the
not
oilus atomid is a korbanat tzibur.
poor, right?
And the oilus re'iyah is a private individual korban that each individual Jew brought up when he went up to be oiler regel. So we've said all along, you can't learn korban yochid from korban tzibur. So this debate is very important because if it's an oilus re'iyah, you can learn that it was also brought before Matan Torah. If it's a korban tomid, you don't have that raya. It's one of the reasons how they preferenced a shlomim over nola, because the shlomim was offered prior to Matan Torah. So this machlekes tanoim is important. So Rabbi Shmuel says, "Klolois nemru b'Sinai uprotois ba'oil moyed." Rashi, harbe dvarim nemru stumim b'Sinai shelo nispasu kol straka. Many halachos were said it says lo sasem halacha by Shabbos. Upirshu halacha shukam mishkan bo'ol moed. Later on, we were given details after the Mishkan was erected in Omay. The various details of how you brought korbanos was not mentioned in Parshas Yisro and Parshas Mishpatim. It says, Mizbach adama taseli, v'zavachta alav v'solosecha v'shlomecha. You shall build a mizbeach, and on it you're going to shech oilus and shlomim. No detail. V'loi pirish matan dmeim didn't say how many. Do you put blood on one corner or four corners? It doesn't say anything about if shitin v'nituchat shel oilos. Do you strip the oil and you cut them into pieces? Or the hakrovas emurim shel shlomim, or offering the innards of the shlomim on the mizbeach. Protois were mentioned by oil moed. Shukam mishkan, says Rashi, v'diber mom ela paroiches. Sham pirish la kosuv. Kidichsi vayikral Moshe v'adiber shem elav me'ol moed lemor. The Sefer Torah's Kohanim, David Vayikra, this parsha called Hilchos Korban. Chein Dvarim Harbin, the same other issues, says Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva disagrees. Klolos uprotos nemer b'Sinai. He says the klolos and the protos, v'nishnu bo'el moed, they were repeated through Moshe to Klal Yisrael in Oil Moed. V'nishtalshu b'arvis moed. The teaching of the Torah happened 3 times. It was taught a second time in Oil Moed, and it was taught a third time in Arvis Moed. When he said Hoyel Moshe be'eres haTorah zos, the Isa gedaytich Torah oila shikru v'sobim be'oilas tamid avi. If you're going to remain with the concept that the oila was an oilas tamid, mi'ik immediately mikorlo boy hefshev nituach v'sof boy hefshev nituach. The oilas tamid there did not require hefshev v'nituach. So how could you have a korban that then is the same kind of korban that didn't require hefshev v'nituach, and here now it needs hefshev v'nituach? Must be that Rabbi Shmuel holds that the ola that was offered in the midbar was oilus re'iyah, not an oilus atomid. Rabbi Eliezer is going to be the third opinion that the oila was an oilus re'iyah, the Tanya. Oilus tamid asuya bar Sinai. Rabbi Eliezer Omer ma'asen nemru b'Sinai v'hi atzma lo karva. How to do the tamid was discussed, but they actually physically didn't do it. So he held they didn't offer the oilus tamid then. Rabbi Kiva Omer karva v'shuv lo yipar. No, it was offered and it never was stopped. So, according to what about the pasuk that says in Amos that the korbanos that were offered for 40 years, it seems to imply that pasuk that they did not offer So how do you answer? Shifta Shalevi Shlav Davad Azar any krivuosa. Shevet Levi that did not worship the Egel Azov, they were makrivim, but Klal Yisrael was not. So that's the three shitas. Beishamah Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Elazar, who holds that the ola that it was offered on the 5th day of Sivan was an oilas re'iyah, not an oilas atami. Beis Hillel had Amaran, that it was an oilas atami. Rabbi Kiva also had Nami Damaran. He clearly opposed Rabbi Shmuel. What's Rabbi Yossi Aglili? At the time, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Sholish mitzvahs nitztav Yisrael ba'loisam l'regel. Klal Yisrael were given 3 mitzvahs when they did Aliyah l'regel. Re'iyah, oilas re'iyah. Chagigah, the korban Chagigah. The simcha, the mitzvah of simcha. There were shlamim of Chagigah and shlamim of simcha. Rashi says, Afem shalmei simcha. Im ein lo psar shlamim. Shal neder v'nedovash is not if kol hashana shemeviim beregel. And v'lo meiser behema, maybe shlamim mishalo. So you bring your whole family to Shalayim. You got to feed them meat. So if during the year you had made nedorim, harei zu shlamim, or harei alai shlamim, and the neder and nedava, so you brought these korbanos on yontif, so you had meat. Let's say you had a meiser behema, you were in the cattle business, and you brought 1/10, you could eat that too. But if you didn't have those things, maybe shlamim mishalo, or you bought it from Mos Meiser Sheni. So you have meat to fill your appetite. Shein simchas chag ele bebasar, says Rashi. You notice it doesn't say yayin. Yesh b're'iyah she'ein b'shteim. There are aspects of the olas re'iyah that don't apply to the other two. Yesh b'chagigah she'ein b'shteim. There's aspects of the korban chagigah that don't apply to the other two. Yesh b'simcha she'ein b'shteim. There are aspects to the Shalmei Simcha that are not by the others. Yesh b're'iyah she'ein b'shteim she're'iyah oila kula l'gavoya. An oila re'iyah is offered and burnt on the mizbeach. Mashen can b'shteim because they're eaten. Yesh b'chagigah mashem yesh chagigah yesh l'fnei adibur. The korban chagigah was offered before Matan Torah. Mashen can b'shteim. The other ones were not offered before Matan Torah. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that there was no oilas re'iyah prior to Matan Torah. And therefore that oil was an oilas atomid. We have our proof. Yesh b'simcha mashen b'shteim, sha'simcha noeges panoshim v'noshim, mashen b'shteim. Mitzvah simcha applied to men and women. The mitzvah of bringing the korban chagigah is only by men. Rabbi Shmuel, my time of kamukmas like Beis Shammai. How come Rabbi Shmuel went like Beis Shammai? That an olah that was makriv there in the midbar was an oilas re'iyah. Why did he say that? Because if that oilah was not oilas tamid, me immediately me kor lo boy hefshem nituach l'sof by hefshem nituach. They had a Masorah that korban didn't do hefshem nituach. How can you? The korban tamid always needs that. So how could you have a thing that in the beginning it didn't need it, and later on it needed it? Now, we established that Rabbi Yossi Aglili is one of the Tanoim that held that the oil was not as tamid. What does he do? He also required that. The Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer. Oila shekriv Yisrael b'midbar, that oila, even though that oila was an oila satamid, the first oila satamid didn't require heshev nituach. The deen that an oilas atomid needed stripping and cutting into pieces only started from oil moed. So why couldn't Rabbi Shmuel hold the same thing? So Enechanami Samim Mikan Rabbi Shmuel. They remove Rabbi Shmuel, doesn't hold of that. Boy Rav Chizai Kroyach Iksiv. Rav Chizda wants to know, where was this written? Vayishlachas narei bnei Yisrael v'yalu alois. The young men of Yisrael offered korbanos. Kvosim. Those were lambs. Vayizbechu zvachim shlomim l'Hashem, parim. Those were cows. Oy dilma idavidi parim havu. Or maybe they were both parim. Because when you read the pasuk, Vayishlachas l'arei bnei Yisrael v'yalu olos, Vayizbechu zvachim shlamim l'Hashem, parim. That could imply that the last statement of the pasuk goes on the whole pasuk. Now, Lamai Nafkamina, like Walter asked, well, why do we care? Marzutra Amr Lepisuk Tamim, we want to know the trop. We have to stop in the middle of the pasuk, Vayalu Olos, stop at Nachta. Or do we read Vayalu Olos, Vayizbechu Shlamim, Parim? It's all one Inyan. If someone takes a neder, I want to bring an oil the same way they brought it in the midbar. Well, we don't know if it's kvasim and parim or it's only parim. My parim avu kvasim avu. Teku. So it would be a suffix what type of animals he would have to bring if a person made such a neder. Okay. We'll stop here.
Ernie, beautiful.
Stop here. Very interesting Gemara. Tomorrow we'll learn at 7:30.
Great.
And then we'll do the Tzum at 8 o'clock. We're doing Hilchas Birchas HaShachar.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay.